r/ask Reddit. Who had the biggest fall from grace in history? Philippe Pétain was a national hero of France after World War I. He won the 9-month Battle of Verdun as a general and inspired hope and optimism at a time when it seemed like the war would never end. Fast forward to World War II and he became the head of state of Vichy France and was a puppet for the Nazis. He ran Vichy state in a semi-fascist manner and constantly sought to appease the Nazis to preserve Vichy's limited freedoms, including signing anti-Semitic ordinances and allowing deportation to concentration camps. At the end of the war, he was convicted of treason on all counts and originally sentenced to death before being reduced to life imprisonment by Charles de Gaulle on account of Pétain's advanced age and service during World War I. De Gaulle would later summarize Pétain's life as successively banal, then glorious, then deplorable, but never mediocre, and also the Marshal is a great man who died in 1925. The trouble is, he didn't know it. China had a similar person. Wang Jingwei was beloved for his role in the 1911 revolution but is now viewed terribly for siding with the Japanese in World War II. His fate was different though. He died in 1944 from a wound he got from an assassination attempt in 1939. His tomb was destroyed by the Rock Army and his burial place now has a note that calls him a traitor. Sounds like that attempt got upgraded to delayed success. Jimmy Savile, mega famous UK radio DJ and TV presenter, did a ton of charity work, was a Knight of the Realm. Post-death, he was revealed to be a massive pedophile, protected and ignored by those around him for decades. Edit. Savile not Savile. Massive pedophile doesn't do it justice. He was one of the most vicious and prolific pedophiles ever in the UK's history apparently. He also ducked dead bodies at hospitals if I remember correctly. Bill Cosby. They say the worst part is the hypocrisy but I don't think so. I think the worst part is the raping. R.I.P. Norm. Loved Norm calling out OJ every week too. Cost him his job. Most people are talking like the last decade, but Mary I of England came to my mind first. Overcame huge threats and obstacles to her right to the throne, because she had the support and love of the people. She defeated the attempted coup, ascended to the throne, showed mercy to the traitors, etc. Then promptly married an unpopular foreigner and tried to force everyone to follow her religion. If they didn't, they got burned alive. Then hubby skipped town anyway, and Mary slowly lost her marbles, and Calais, and kept burning people alive. History tends to remember her younger half-sister Elizabeth I a bit more favorably. Edit. OMG, what have I done, my friends? Tudor history is awesome, and dramatic, and insane, and ducking tragic, and very well documented by multiple contemporary sources. Go check it out. 100 years of more drama than you can imagine. For those saying Elizabeth killed more for religion than Mary did, here's someone who did some. Sourced, quick and dirty mouth. https://allthingsRobertDudley, WordPress.com. The 21st of February 2019. Did good Queen Bess kill more people for religion than Bloody Mary? Also, Mary did all her executions over the space of her 5-year reign. Elizabeth I reigned for 45 years and still managed to execute fewer people. I am still sympathetic to Mary I. Her life ducking sucked for about 1,000 reasons. Important update here, user u/Keith1USF has pointed out that Mary died on this day, November 17, 1558. I'm pretty sure we all need to go into the nearest bathroom, close the door, turn off the lights and say Bloody Mary 3 times, and just, hope for the best. I mean, they didn't name the drink Bloody Mary because she donated blood for the needy. It was because she had celery sticking out of her head. Icarus. Well, if we're going there, I would argue Lucifer Morningstar. Winner. Pretty sure it's the origin of the phrase fall from grace. Jimmy Savile. If you allow for posthumous falls from grace, let me paint you a picture. Here is the ultimate working class boy made good. He worked as a coal miner during the Second World War. Once that was over, he tried a number of things. He was a professional wrestler for a while, lost every match, was a pioneer DJ. He essentially invented the job, and hosted a primetime TV show well into his 70s based on the premise of fulfilling outlandish dreams for kids. In his spare time, he worked as a volunteer porter at his local hospital and ran marathons. raising millions of pounds for charities, attracting a slew of honors, and while he may have been a bit eccentric, he was widely regarded as a national treasure. That is, until a couple of years after he died. Turns out Jimmy had a thing for young girls. Quite a thing. As it happens, he made Bill Cosby look like the angel Gabriel. We are talking one step below wandering around the TV studios where he worked with a 12-year-old latched onto his penis. He'd got away with it precisely because of his public persona. He successfully persuaded almost all the girls he abused that nobody would ever believe them. One of the reasons he worked at hospitals was because he was a necrophiliac and had access to the morgue. If I recall correctly, he knew he was guilty as duck and didn't want the same to happen to him. His will requested that he be buried encased in cement. Edit. Link at www. BBC.com News Ark England York North Yorkshire 15,717,221. Benedict Arnold, hero general of the American Revolution, one of George Washington's best assets, felt slighted and overlooked by his contemporaries, switched sides to the British, made no difference to the war effort, died in disgrace in England. His name is now a synonym for traitor. Edit. Since this is getting some attention, for anyone interested in learning more about the man, I highly recommend watching Benedict Arnold, A Question of Honor, a TV movie from 2003, starring Aidan Quinn as Arnold and Kelsey Grammer as Washington. Arnold had 2 horses shot under him, including one at the Battle of Saratoga, where he was instrumental in securing victory at Bemis Heights. Arnold was going between the lines while being shot at, unharmed for most of the battle as he urged his men on until both he and his horse was hit with the final volley as the British were fleeing and the Americans were taking the important position. Arnold's leg was shot and broken by the horse. Following this, the British at Saratoga surrendered. This was a major inflection point of the American Revolution, showing Europeans that the Americans were serious and could beat the British on land, and soon foreign aid was given openly. Had Arnold been killed that day, all over the Northeast you would see statues to this man. Instead there is but one monument to his injured leg in Saratoga that doesn't even say his name. When Benedict Arnold was leading the forces of the king against his former compatriot in Virginia, among his prisoners was a certain plucky and witty officer, who, in answer to Arnold's question, "What will the Americans do with me if they catch me?" replied, "They will cut off the leg which was wounded when you were fighting so gloriously for the cause of liberty, and bury it with the honors of war, and hang the rest of your body on a gibbet." Harvey Weinstein. He was Hollywood when he got outed for the pose he has, but this guy produced, just naming the top 3, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, 2, every Tarantino movie except Hollywood, and 3, Good Will Hunting and, subsequently, about every Damon or Affleck project from that time to his downfall. He's won more Oscars than any person could ever dream and has made more money off films than maybe anyone ever. That guy, oh man. I think he fell the furthest, the hardest and the fastest. Well deserved though. Well ducking deserved. I take issue with the LOTR point. He is hated by Sir Peter Jackson and the movies would be terrible if Sir Peter wasn't able to find other money. That being said, Harvey did recognize the potential as Sir PJ's resume was questionable at the time. Edit. Added Sir before Sir Peter Jackson's name. Additionally, many are asking why I take issue with the point. ESTLLP raw duck. Edit. I'm not disputing that, although I would have reasonable grounds to. I'm disputing that the LOTR films contributed to a gracious image for Weinstein. Grace is a state of admiration. Harvey was not admired for his association with the LOTR films. In fact, the opposite is true. To break his deal with Miramax, Sir Peter had to repay $20 million to Harvey and retain Harvey's executive producer credit. New Line Cinema and Barry Osborne would go on to actually produce the films. That one a-hole orc that dodges the boulder and spits on it in ROTK is apparently based on Harvey. Roses are red, violets are glorious. Don't try to surprise. Oscar Pistorius. My son's high school played rugby against Oscar's old high school. Whenever anyone went into the team toilets, they'd call out, "I'm on the loo. Don't shoot me." Small interesting aside, Elon Musk also attended Oscar's high school, years before. Pretoria Boys High School, we thrash them in rugby by at least 30 points every season. Jared Fogle. He started and ended his career trying to get into smaller pants. Started with a mild cholesterol problem. Developed a child molesteral problem. Fritz Haber, a German chemist and Nobel Prize winner. He helped pioneer the Haber process for synthesizing ammonia. This is important because it was a key ingredient in artificial fertilizer. His actions enabled the world to feed itself, unlocked the chemistry behind allowing us to grow food that outstrips the consumption of humanity. In the 1900s he figured out the chemistry behind allows us to make sure no one died of famine ever again. Open bracket. Providing we put in the input, it was now possible to feed the world thanks to him, and he laid the groundwork for further developments. At a time when much of the world was still illiterate and ruled by kings, he has saved countless lives from hunger, untold millions, unlocking a piece of science that changed the face of organic chemistry forever. Then came the First World War. If he were a sorcerer, it would be as if he turned to the darkest of arts. After saving the world and gifting such an innovation to humanity, he then turned his mind to destroying it. He invented chemical warfare, designed chemical weapons from scratch, unleashed chlorine gas, and founded an entire dark science that bore the weight of sarin, phosphorus, chlorine, and other unholy weapons of war used by war criminals and tyrants for the next century. He led brigades devoted to chemical war, recruited other renowned scientists to his cause, and turned the science most devoted to creation and change for the betterment of humanity into another weapon. I'm a chemist. This science is the most used, visible, and strikes a balance between raw universal forces and physical applications. It is nothing short of the engineering of reality, shaping the universe like clay in our hands, and he used it to kill, on an industrial scale, and thanks to him, there will be no going back. In my mind, he is the greatest fall from grace, from one of humanity's greatest, to one its most forsaken. It's nuts. Nearly 50% of the nitrogen atoms in our bodies are from the Haber process. Father of toxic gas and chemical warfare. Ian Watkins, former singer of the Welsh emo rock band Lost Prophets, massively successful band in the scene. Turns out he dealt meth to fans to abuse them and then rape their babies' toddlers. Yes, you read right. I almost threw up when I read the indictment. Locked away for life. That one. The band has erased all music from all services as far as possible. It's tainted forever. I read the case file. Holy cow. And when asked why he did what he did, he said he did it for the lols. His password was iDuckets, and 2 of the infants' mothers sold their own babies out to him. There are text messages detailing the abuse they were planning to subject the infants to. And remember, one of his ex-GFs tried getting the police involved numerous times only to be told to duck off and no investigations being done. And then when the cops finally did something, they tried to arrest her too under the ducked up aiding and abetting bullshit claim, which her lawyer fought because she had years worth of evidence against the cops showing she made an effort to report his sick ass. The whole case is one big police duck up after another, like holy shit. OJ has to be up there. What would the Terminator franchise be like if James Cameron didn't think he was too nice to play a killer? I'd be also curious what Schwarzenegger's career would look like without his most iconic role. By the time I was a child, Bill Cosby was so universally recognized as an icon of wholesome comedy that one of the most popular kids shows of my youth was literally just a cartoon about his childhood. Now the legacy of that little cartoon show is tainted by the very subject of the show itself. That's a fall from grace. From being trusted to be a part of your kid's formative years, to becoming one of the most vile and disliked men of all time. I don't know how I didn't realize that little Bill was by Cosby until right now. Guess I just never paid enough attention. That's quite a stain on my childhood now. I thought you guys were referring to Fat Albert. Duck, I'm old. He was never the biggest star, but Mark Salling's fall from grace was massive. Went from the star of a primetime show to charged with child porn and dead in a matter of months. On that note, Allison Mack went from the actress of the breakout character on a long-running popular superhero show to a cult leader who trafficked women for sex and forced labor, blackmailed them, branded them, and tortured them. There's also Grace Park, one of the stars of Battlestar Galactica and Hawaii Five-0, who was part of that cult too. I think she left though. One of her co-stars was and is still a big part of it though and actually married Mac, Nikki Klein. She was Callie on BSG. Robespierre. His actual death was brutal. For those who don't know, he tried to kill himself, but was stopped and ended up only blowing his own jaw off. He then was kept alive all night with a massive facial injury until he was beheaded in the morning. Just before he was beheaded, the executioner ripped the bandages off his face, and only the guillotine blade silenced his screams. One of the major events that stands out during the French Revolution for me. Didn't he also face the blade of the guillotine instead of facing the basket? I remember something about the guillotine having people face the basket so they won't have to die a terrifying way. It is still terrifying though, and that they had Robespierre face the guillotine blade so that his death would be more terrifying. Aaron Burr. He was Vice President of the United States when he shot and killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. The duel killed Burr's political career. He was dropped from Thomas Jefferson's ticket in the 1804 election, and he couldn't even win an election for governor of New York. In 1805, Burr plotted to invade Spanish territories and create his own empire, with a side plot to incite a revolution against the United States. In 1807, Burr was put on trial for treason, and he narrowly escaped a conviction. Don't forget he wanted to cause New England to secede from the Union out of spite. He wasn't willing to wait for it. Lance Armstrong. Not just the drug thing either. He went to insane lengths to silence people trying to expose the drug scandal within the cycling sphere. He threatened people and publicly harassed and embarrassed people. Even former Tour de France winners weren't safe from his wrath. He was invincible and used it to bludgeon people's careers, reputations and personal lives. Yeah, his fall was nuts. I'm sure there are worse people, but Harvey Weinstein went from being one of the most powerful people in the world to be completely reviled and losing everything. This is the guy who had Meryl Streep and Oprah on speed dial and married to a woman 1000x too attractive for him. He now uses a walker, has lost his fortune and his reputation, and his dong is literally rotting off. Open bracket. In case you didn't know, several of the women who accused him of sexual misconduct all pointed out that he wasn't really interested in sex per se. He just wanted massages. According to some, his hygiene was so poor he developed an infection in his dong, which then rotted the flesh after being left untreated. He basically got gangrene on his genitals and was effectively impotent. He's been described as having fish-like genitals. Ick. WTF does that even mean? Jim Jones. He originally stood up for civil rights, then he became a cult leader. From a civil rights leader to cult murderer who was responsible for more than 900 deaths. He was always a cult leader. He was just helpful in utilizing his cult in being able to influence politics, which made him useful to politicians and kept the cult from attracting negative attention. Chris Benoit. He was famous as a pro wrestler until he murdered his wife and child. CTE is horrible edit. He's obviously still a piece of shit BTW, but I think CTE when I think of him. CTE can turn you into a monster. It'll make you want to become a werewolf or a vampire. Quisling is legit a word for a collaborating traitor in English too. His name is such a perfectly weasel sounding name for it too. It just sounds gross and already has the ling suffix on it. Not the biggest, but Armie Hammer casually outing himself as a cannibal was pretty big. Get it? There is a docuseries about it called House of Hammer. I felt my eyes bug out of my head when I read CNN rather than click hole under the headline on Facebook. He outed himself? I thought women came forward and he denied it. Benedict Arnold would be celebrated as the second most important founding father after George Washington, if not for, well, you know. America loses the Battle of Saratoga without him. Saratoga was what convinced the French that we were serious about overthrowing the British. French assistance likely doesn't happen unless we win at Saratoga. Independence was possible without the French, but we'll never know the outcome without them. Kevin Spacey was once my favorite actor, but now I can't look at him the same in any of his works. Edit. If I get one more Reddit silver I'm going to puke in my mouth. Facing 7 new charges in England. Facing 7 new charges in England. Fikes that for you, and I couldn't agree more with OP. Nate from Ted Lasso. Man, I loved then hated that guy so fast. Dude went grey in a year and a half. Nationally, internationally, you of course have megastars and politicians. On a local level, I submit predatory doctor and religious leader David Farley. 200 plus accusers, unless you're the DA, who disputes that number by saying there were only over 100 victims that came forward. So, somewhere between 101 and 299. Of course, he still has his defenders, but he retired and moved out of state to be with his family basically overnight. Note that his retirement email was sent to his patients, some of whom had appointments scheduled, without mention of losing his license to practice medicine or the lawsuit news article dropping that week. Accusations range from medical malpractice to sexual assault from girls and women of all ages. When he slipped out of state to be with his family, he was substitute teaching within days next door in Idaho, and has now moved to Utah. At least half his kids aren't speaking with him, but my parents assure me it's all made up because, and I quote, "He really helped us out when you were sick." Yes, I know him personally, and yes, I believe the victims, and yes, I will share this story anywhere it comes up naturally. Dude should be in prison forever. How the duck can they just willy-nilly decide to not proceed with a trial after that many victims come forward? This better not be the end of this. Bastard needs to face consequences. Edit typos and wording. Rudy Giuliani. The Four Seasons thing still makes me laugh hard to believe what he's like now after 9/11. Did he ever have a soul? Jeffrey Epstein went from rubbing elbows with world royals and the wealthiest elites of the world to hanging himself in prison all alone. I guess you could say his elitist friends left him hanging. Edit. Damn. Looks like this blew up. Would he be able to rub elbows with the world royals if wasn't for his side gig? The biggest take we could take out from that whole thing is how much we underestimate the amount of creeps and degenerates among the world elites. Doc Hudson. The fabulous Hudson Hornet, 3-time Piston Cup winner. He did what in his cup? Lance Armstrong's reputation shit the bed pretty enthusiastically. The bracelets didn't help. Jeffrey Epstein. People forget how ex-presidents and celebrities were lining up to suck this guy's dong, until it all went horribly wrong. Don't think they were young enough for him. Hitler was actually praised by world leaders at the time of his rise. I forget what controversy brought him down though. Philippe Pétain would be one. Good one, excellent example. French hero of World War I to Nazi collaborator of World War II. Crassus, one of the richest men alive in Roman history, and one of the 3 triumvirate with Caesar and Mark Antony. Then he died by liquid gold being poured down his throat. Edit. Pompey not Mark Antony. Edit 2. Okay, there appears to be varied stories about his death. Another version is that he was killed in battle and Parthians poured liquid gold down his throat afterwards as mockery. Regardless, pretty humiliating way to go for someone who accomplished so much. Not the biggest fall, but Charles Lindbergh deserves to be in the conversation. After making the historic first solo transatlantic flight and gaining the sympathy of many after the kidnapping and murder of his son, he promoted American neutrality in World War II, though he reversed his stance after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Many had already branded him a Nazi sympathizer. He eventually did rehabilitate his image, but after his death, it came out that he had 3 separate secret families throughout Europe, so I guess it's a mixed legacy at best. Vladimir Putin, once thought of as a shady, but politically savvy and strong leader of a decently powerful nation with one of the strongest militaries in the world, is now known as an incompetent, greedy a-hole leading a country that has gone into a massive economic recession, that also has a joke of a military that anything above a literal third world despotic regime could beat with ease. Napoleon went from being emperor and having control over half of Europe to being exiled on a tiny island. Of course, he came back, but it was short-lived and he got exiled again to an even more remote island, Mayo. Edit. Of course Napoleon has a huge legacy, not arguing that, but I still think it's a major fall from grace, at least in his time. I guess it depends on how you want to look at it. Humpty Dumpty. Not the farthest, but Phil Spector is worth it as honorary mention. Milli Vanilli. Michael Vick is the big sports one I usually think of, that's not the obvious ones like OJ. Joe Parr. The century is still young, plenty of time. Hang out and see for yourself. Elon Musk incoming. This may be off topic, but the African National Congress went from being the first democratically elected party in South Africa, the beacon of freedom that ended apartheid, to now being the fattest, leech-filled government on the continent. State capture, the biggest presidential cabinet in the world, all making hundreds and thousands of rands a month trying to figure out new ways to finesse citizens through tax levies, corruption, nepotism, tenders, and selling off the country through loans they'll never be able to pay back. It's sad being young in this country, cause I'm watching my friends and I kill ourselves with how much we drink and do drugs because there isn't anything better to do. Shocking unemployment rates, especially amongst the youth who fall into traps like booze and drugs because they stuck at home. As educated as some are, others drop out in high school through pregnancy, circumstance, or dumb shit. But if the ANC delivered on half the shit they've promised since '94, then I truly believe we'd be in a better place. Nowhere near first world but emerging economy status. This will be the worst fall from grace because the damage done cannot be fixed. Will it get better? Maybe 2 generations from now. But the world is ducked already and I'll be dead then. So yay. I don't think it gets a lot worse than that. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.